Okay, morning guys. Hope everyone had a nice 3-day weekend. I just want to make a quick announcement about grades. So grades for your teachers, we need to start finalizing our grade books, presenting them to Ms. Hewitt, Ms. Walkowick starting on Friday. So obviously what we do in the first 2 weeks of June, that all counts, but we need to be able to present like a fully updated version of our grade books this Friday. What that means is any kind of old work, late work this week, like it cannot happen because we need to have our grades 100% updated by the end of the week. So if you submit something late this week, it will not be accepted. Please make sure that you are submitting stuff on time, especially if you're one of those people that's like in the 63-ish range or something, or you're right on the cusp between a C and a B, a C plus and a B minus, or something like that, like you're right on the cusp. Make sure that all your work from this week is submitted on time so that you don't end up in the last week with a couple of zeros that bring your grade down negatively, right? The other thing is, if you have any specific questions about late work, please make sure you call or text me directly. Don't just comment it on an assignment in Google. Sometimes it can be hard to catch those comments and I won't necessarily see it. I do my best to respond to those quickly, but it doesn't always happen. So if you have something that you need to talk to me about directly, text me. My number is all over Google Classroom, but I'll make sure to post it again underneath today's assignment, all right? Okay, with that said, let's get to our learning target for today. I will be able to explain the effects of the Korematsu versus US case. So obviously Korematsu versus US, that is our new target, or that is our new term. You might have guessed from the end of this learning target that Korematsu versus the US is a court case. Whenever you see this kind of format, someone or something versus the US versus the US government, your brain should automatically go, oh, this is a court case. Oftentimes, or not oftentimes, but the most important court cases generally end up at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, so throwback to the beginning of the year, to December, the Supreme Court is part of the judicial branch. You might remember from our study of government that the judicial branch is the one that evaluates laws / decides if laws are fair. Last week, we learned about a type of law called an executive order, Order 9066, that resulted in the internment camps. The internment camps, the prison camps of Japanese Americans. Okay? So last week we learned all about how hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans, many of whom were full citizens of the US, grew up here, grew up totally American, during World War II, were thrown into internment camps, meaning prison camps, simply because it was thought that Japanese Americans would side with Japan during World War II. We have to remember that during World War II, US, France, Great Britain are the Allied powers, and they're fighting against the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. So many Japanese Americans during this time period of World War II are suspected of siding with Japan, wrongly. They're, as a result, thrown in the prison camps we learned about last week. Today, it is our job to figure out, eventually, once this type of law, Order 9066, once it's passed and Japanese Americans are thrown into prison camps, what does the Supreme Court, what does the judicial branch do about it? Do they evaluate this law, 9066, and decide, yeah, that's a fair law, we can keep it? Or did the Supreme Court act to get rid of the law? Our job today is to figure out what the Supreme Court did about this law, which threw many Japanese Americans into prison camps during World War II. I've got a quick video to show you that gives you a visual overview, kind of a timeline of all this information, after which I'm going to show you what you are doing for your activity today. I'm sharing the screen so you can see the video. This video is also available in Google Classroom. If the quality is laggy, you can watch it in Google Classroom.
Supreme Court briefs. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, December 7th, 1941.
December 7th, 1941.
Yeah, Japan drops bombs on an American naval base, killing more than 2,400 Americans and injuring 1,000 more. In response, the United States declares war on Japan, officially entering World War II. Increasingly, Americans viewed anyone of Japanese heritage suspiciously. Japanese Americans had already faced racism and discrimination in the country for nearly 100 years. After the Pearl Harbor attack, that racism and discrimination went to the next freaking level, as many thought Japanese Americans might be more loyal to Japan than the United States, sharing military secrets with them and stuff, or trying to sabotage the war efforts. Despite there being no evidence whatsoever that this was happening, Japanese American persecution increased. People bought Jap hunting licenses. Life magazine published an article illustrating how to tell the difference between a Japanese person and a Chinese person by the shape of their nose and height. In California, the racism and paranoia seemed to be worse. A barber shop there advertised, quote, free shaves for Japs, with a disclaimer that read, quote, not responsible for accidents. A funeral parlor advertised, quote, I'd rather do business with a Jap than an American. Several people called for removing all Japanese Americans from Western states and forcing them to live in concentration camps somewhere else. President Franklin Roosevelt, who had a record of being racist against the Japanese, agreed with this idea. He signed Executive Order 9066. It ordered the roundup of 120,000 Americans of Japanese descent to one of 10 concentration camps, officially called, quote, relocation centers. It also said Japanese Americans weren't allowed to be in California at all, as well as much of Oregon, Washington, and Arizona, unless they were in one of the camps, of course. Fred Korematsu was one of the Japanese Americans who said the heck with Executive Order 9066. He stayed in California. He had a girlfriend who was not Japanese American there. He didn't want to leave and just thought Roosevelt's order was wrong. So after his entire family left for one of the camps, he stayed behind, became a welder, and tried not to stand out too much. He changed his name and got a fake ID. Later, he even tried to have plastic surgery on his eyes to look less Japanese. The plastic surgeon who worked on him didn't do the procedure, but took his money anyway. Shortly after this, someone reported him and he was arrested. After his arrest, he never saw his girlfriend again, by the way. Eventually, Korematsu found himself in federal prison. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, reached out to him there and offered to represent him in court. Korematsu said, heck yeah. Together they argued that Executive Order 9066 went against the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. Korematsu's loyalty to the United States was never in question. Still, in federal court in San Francisco, he was convicted, given 5 years of probation, and sent to a concentration camp in Utah. He appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals, who agreed with the lower courts. He then appealed again, and the Supreme Court agreed to hear the case, hearing arguments in October 1944, with the war still raging on. During arguments, the court considered a similar case from the previous year called Hirabayashi v. United States. That one upheld Executive Order 9066. The court announced its decision on December 18, 1944. It sided with the United States, but this one was certainly controversial. It was 6-3. The court argued that Executive Order 9066 was justified in order to keep the country safe. They said the need to protect Americans from espionage was more important than individual rights.
So your job today is to learn about the case which challenged the idea of the internment camps, the Japanese internment camps. Directions. In today's lesson, you'll be listening to an interview with Fred Korematsu, a Japanese-American man who was placed in an internment camp during World War II. Fred Korematsu eventually sued the U.S., claiming that the government was not allowed to put citizens in prison just because it thought they might side with the enemy during a war. Your job is to answer each question after listening to the clips of the podcast. You will notice that there are two parts. It's the first 12 minutes, as well as about 5 minutes from the middle of the podcast. You have to skip to the part of the podcast which is outlined, which is indicated by the timestamp. Answer the questions as you listen to the podcast. You can also listen to the podcast clip and then go back and answer the question. However you prefer to do it, you can go ahead and do it the way you prefer. If you are having trouble accessing the link, the YouTube link, you can simply listen to the MP4, which is attached.